Hey y'all, what's going on? This is Fabian60, better known as TWE TV, brought to you guys another YouTube video. Now, the main purpose of this video is just to kind of go over actually a signal I called out in VIP. I was like kind of scrolling through there. It has a lot of TPs, but you know, this trade was mainly push towards, any kind of audience. I mean, there's scalps, swings, intradays, and then it all comes down to different kinds of risk management strategies, whatever you may be. So I kind of, changed how I personally would have traded it, to, what I actually put out there. Right. I'm not too sure how many people really trade USD JPY too much, but I do know back in the day it was very popular and I go back and forth on it here and there. But biggest thing, so let's start breaking it down. Now, what exactly am I looking for? So first off, here's a 15-minute demand, right? And I'm trying to connect now order flow with market structure. Okay, so that's going to be my main focus right now because I'm trying to slowly get down to where my main point of entry is. So here we had a lot of volume, had a big reaction, right? Maybe that was caused by news. We don't necessarily know right off the top of our head. But here's another demand that is being respected. Let me just kind of grab that whole little range. Like I always tell people, if you aren't comfortable with putting like a single candlestick, that's fine. Just grab the range. Stay on the safe side. That's what I always tell people. So ideally, in a nutshell, this is kind of my entry model. So let's kind of hop into kind of like an example, right? Because the biggest thing we're looking for is finding order flow, finding reactions. That's what we're doing. So here's kind of like a model of what I'm looking for. So bear with me for a second. I'm going to be marking out a couple, a little bit of demand zones, kind of just to describe to you guys kind of like what I'm looking for. I mean, ideally, this is order flow, right? So we have one demand form, right? And as it's forming, reacting, it's creating another. That's what we're looking for. Now, on the exact one that we're ideally looking for an entry, now this is where I want to hop into a lower time frame, right? And I like to kind of see this structure. The biggest reason on why I'm kind of looking for an entry model, at least similar to this. It doesn't have to, be perfect and look like this. I mean, like I said, you have to develop multiple different kinds of entry models. Now, this one in particular, right, we have an extreme, right, lower time frame demand that just formed right there. And following that, we should now be paying attention to liquidity, right, or possibly other, right, POIs. In this case, it's going to be a supply that it's reacting, but not only that it's reacting, but it blows through it, right? And ideally, we also have that midpoint that in a way, in this case, it's being used as liquidity. So liquidity is being swept here. We want to see that. We want to see liquidity build up, kind of like what me and Solo always talk about, liquidity phases, and then it gets swept. And then we have a little bit of a target, right? That's going to help, motivate the market to push it in that direction and ultimately break a high. So that's ideally kind of like what we're viewing here, if that kind of makes sense. Now, let's kind of hop into the higher time frame just for a second, just to kind of mark up some things real quick, kind of like possibilities of where we can target. So we're on the 4 hour here. And as I wanted to point out, let me just, fix that little range of candles. Like I always tell people, if you're okay with putting a range, just do it. That's a 4 hour zone. And I'm going to go ahead and mark out two more zones. I'll kind of zoom in on that once I finish marking them out here. But each one of these are 4 hour zones. So ideally, the main reason why I'm marking these out is how I view it, right? From a market structure standpoint, it's switched kind of bullish, right? And as of right now, we should look at these 4-hour zones as a point of pullback, as in the market's going to pull into it, but we have a high chance of seeing like a, lower time frame pullback to possibly get in for longs. So in this case, we see that, okay, it tapped into a 4-hour. Beautiful. Now, with that being said, we're looking for order flow and possibly to look for an entry. So kind of just to break it down a little bit into what we're seeing here on the higher time frame, just to understand that whole idea, it broke two structures. So MD, kind of like what I was always preaching in our boot camps, at least from a market structural standpoint, you need at least two consistent break of structures or two previous secured structures to be swept for you to actually have data to actually make a logical decision on what's going to be the next move in the market. So here I'm kind of suspecting, okay, after it reacted off of that 4-hour previously, we should see a bullish move possibly to the next 4-hour, which that was my overall bias here. By all means, it could change if, let's say, we see a genuine reaction to the next 4-hour. But as of right now, that's my idea. That's what I'm looking at. That's what I'm targeting. So let's break down the entry model here. So in this case, right, this is where I'm just about to call a signal out. And this is kind of my thought process. So we identified order flow. Okay, we already got that. We have a reaction, just like how it's being circled there. We got that reaction to the 15-minute. Now, I'm also paying attention to those singular candlesticks there, that it creates a supply, right? It reacts to that, right? Because that's the biggest thing. You want to look for a constant reaction. That's what I call a transaction. So you're basically collecting data to figure out who is in control, right? And I'm also looking at it as well. Let me kind of zoom in a little bit. I'm kind of, I'm trying to minimize that so it doesn't look like too much noise. That's the biggest thing. I hate for my charts to look like there's too much noise. That's the same thing for indicators. You never want too much. So it's reacting to that, right? It's reacting to that supply. Okay. Now with that reaction, that's where we have at least in this case, that's going to be considered our midpoint of this move, right? It reacts and then it blows through it. That's literally the exact same way. So if I kind of mark it out, kind of like what I was, expressing before, right? A supply is created, gets a reaction, then is swept. So literally the exact same model we have here, but it's slightly different. It's not a big deal. In this case, we're hoping for the midpoint to sweep versus a signal. I wasn't exactly hoping for the midpoint to sweep just because how I was viewing it, right? This midpoint actually looked like a better option just because if I were to look at, let's say, the extreme, right, which we can even, honestly, we can even identify this as another midpoint, and this is where we're moving our stop loss, and just to cover both, just to be extra safe, we could look at it like that, but what kind of sticks with me is liquidity, right? Because the whole idea of my previous entry model that I described to you guys is liquidity wasn't identified and swept, so it sweeps the midpoint. So in this case, it's creating liquidity, right? So this is a perfect example of what Sol always says, liquidity phases is you basically want to identify liquidity pools, what's going to be swept and what's going to be targeted. So the equal low that I have there resting right before the POI could ideally be that liquidity that's going to be swept, if that kind of makes sense. So I call this signal just to, give a lot of space, a bigger stop loss, just because, I know there's a lot of, people in our community that don't exactly catch all the quick moves that we like to call, let's say, on our live streams and stuff like that. So I decided to make this signal very friendly to anyone, even if you are, let's say, working or whatever, and you can catch it, a little late, because it doesn't just take off. It's a swing trade. and it's not only just a swing trade, it doesn't have a tight stop loss. So in this case, it could have been like a whole 1-9 if you take it right off of that 15-minute midpoint. But, how I view it is, if you are someone that's okay with that kind of risk, or, you're not sitting by the charts or our Discord waiting for us to throw a trade out there, then this works for you. So how I'm looking at it, so okay, that liquidity beautifully was swept. Let me just adjust that really quickly. So that liquidity was the target, at least, just to get kicked out, right? And after sweeps hit, then that liquidity resting on top, that liquidity pool is what's ultimately being targeted. Now, each one of these TPs has a purpose. I know a lot of people are asking me, Fabian, what is with all these TPs? Well, the main reason is each one of these TPs on the lower time frame kind of represents a little bit of structure or possibly a liquidity pool that I'm targeting, if that kind of makes sense. Now, how I'm viewing, like, let's say this last one here, I was kind of aiming for around this section, but then I realized as well that if I move that real quick, it's literally, 80% of that entire move, so for it being that 80% of that move, I say that final, well, not the final, but second to last TP should be where you're taking 80% of your total lot size in this trade. So if you're a dollar lot, take 80% of that out if you haven't been taking partials along the way. So the first one, I always tell people, if you want to move your stop loss to break even, you can, or wait for the second one. It's so many different strategies out there. But now the biggest thing, that was that beautiful trade. Awesome. And you even see that it comes back and it's doing the exact same thing, creating order flow. So let me go ahead and just delete all these, which, these were alarms. They're raised on TradingView. I don't know if you guys use that or not. I love it. I love to set alarms all over the place just to, kind of make a trading decision every time it attaches to one alarm. So let me just go ahead and mark out that little range there, 15-minute range. And now let's go ahead and hop onto 1 minute. I'm sure we can find an entry here because all it is order flow. Now, instead of entering on the 15-minute, this would be like what I would call enter as a scalper, hold as a swing trader. So right here, for example, we got a supply, right? We have beautiful reactions, beautiful. Just sweeps it. Kind of creates a little bit of midpoint here that could ideally be the entry, but a lot of people say, oh, why don't you enter the extreme? Well, the extreme has that order flow, right? It was already mitigated. So there's no reason to enter on an extreme. So, we don't enter on an extreme because it wasn't swept yet. So that's why the midpoint would be that logical entry here. And then it has that, beautiful, beautiful push to target all the rest of that liquidity there, So with all that being said, now, the market's kind of being very aggressive to the upside. And like I said, it's literally a constant selection of order flow. You just need to identify that. And once you can identify that, I promise you your trading style will go to a whole nother level. Yeah, so I hope y'all enjoyed the gems. And if you have any questions or if you want to hop into our bootcamp or VIP, definitely check out my links below. And as always, guys, stay profitable.